Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Rosa here of Splat Communications and Simplified Strategic Solutions. But before we start, please allow us to make a few requests. Please don't skip ads. This allows us to remain independent. Please subscribe if you have not done so yet. We promote a healthy discourse in the comment section. Just be mindful of the words you choose, as this is a direct reflection of you as a person. The first 100 days of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Day 1, July 1, 2022. The chief executive started his day attending the Holy Mass. In a moment of solemnity, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. offers his prayers during a morning Mass at the Regal Parish and National Shrine of St. Michael and the Archangels in the city of Manila. The morning Mass comes the day after the new chief executive attended several ceremonies and received foreign dignitaries on the day of his inauguration on June 30, 2022 as the 17th President of the Philippines. Also present during the Holy Mass are Vice President and Department of Education, DepEd, Secretary Sara Zimmerman Duterte, members of the Cabinet, and other public officials. The morning Mass was officiated by His Eminence Jose F. Cardinal Advincula, Archbishop of Manila. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. meets the former security officers who served under the term of his late father, President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos, in a walk of closure at the Malikonan Palace grounds. In a solemn and meaningful ceremony, rendering their final salute are former Captain Mervin Espadero, Security Escort Officer, former Lieutenant Colonel Delmar Magno, from the Office of the Senior Aide-de-Camp and Presidential Nurse of former First Lady Imelda Marcos, former First Lieutenant Menandro Espinelli, Security Officer of Presidential Sister, Irene Marcos Araneta, and former Lieutenant Colonel Faye Castro, Presidential Nurse of former President Marcos, Sr. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. graces the 75th anniversary of the Philippine Air Force, PAF, at Clark Air Base in Mabalicat City, Pampanga. During the celebration, the Commander-in-Chief, assisted by PAF Commanding General Lieutenant General Connor Anthony Canlas Sr., administers the presentation
Ladies
of
and
awards to
gentlemen,
PAF
the 17th
units
President
and
of the
personnel
Republic
who
of the
showcase
Philippines and the
exemplary
Commander-in-Chief
performance in
Armed Forces of the
military
Philippines,
service.
His Excellency Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
Once again, the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines and Commander-in-Chief Armed Forces of the Philippines, His Excellency Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He is accompanied by the Commanding General, Philippine Air Force, Lieutenant General Connor Anthony D. Canlas Sr. This year, we are celebrating the Diamond Anniversary of the Philippine Air Force. This momentous event reaffirms our commitment and resolve to continue to serve the country and defend our precious skies.
Once again, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
The Philippine Air Force started as the Philippine Constabulary Air Corps in 1930 with only 3 Stearman 73L3 trainer planes in its inventory. In 1935, it was redesignated as the Philippine Army Air Corps and finally in 1947 evolved into the Philippine Air Force we know today. Our acquisition of F-86 Sabre jets and F-5 Freedom fighters during the 50s to 60s catapulted the PAF into the jet age, making the Philippines as one of the military powerhouses in Southeast Asia. From that decade up to the early 2000s, the PAF played a key role in the government's anti-insurgency campaign, fighting against coups d'etats and keeping the territorial integrity of our country intact by utilizing these assets. Our presence in the international community was widely known, supporting foreign peacekeeping operations in Korea, Congo, Vietnam, and Indonesia, when it seemed like we would climb to greater heights. The Asian financial crisis in 1997 swept the country's economy, halting the funding of AFP modernization projects, which subsequently caused the PAF's air power to wane. We endured and remained resilient. Despite the eventual decommissioning of our air assets and other equipment, the PAF carried on, providing that its resolve to be the protectors and guardians of our skies never weakened. Thankfully, with the unprecedented arrival of newer assets, the PAF became the game changers for humanitarian assistance and disaster response and territorial defense, which has put us back on track towards our modernization efforts. As an agile and dependable organization, the PAF has continued progressing and adapting to various situations. The pandemic had us intensify our efforts to address the ills of our country. Whether flying locally or internationally, we delivered the medical protective equipment and vaccines needed for our citizens. We have honed our craft in delivering the air power needed by our compatriots on the ground and sea, providing precise strikes day or night and guarding our maritime domain from external threats. As we face the fourth industrial revolution, we have heightened our network-centric operations, enabling us to better perform our mandates. In an ever-evolving landscape, difficulties and challenges will persist. But with the heroic efforts of the past and present airmen, the PAF will continue to be a capable and credible organization to protect the people and state from any and all threats. This is our commitment. This is our promise. Lipad, Philippine Air Force.
Likewise, May we request our guest of honor, the Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces of the Philippines, His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr., to confer the awards. He will be assisted by the Commanding General, Lieutenant General Connor Anthony D. Canlas Sr., Philippine Air Force.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of the Philippines and the Commander-in-Chief, Armed Forces of the Philippines, His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Our Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Andres Centino, former President and now Congresswoman Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, AFP Chief of Staff General Centino, Philippine Army Commanding General Lieutenant General Romeo Browner, officers and enlisted personnel of the Philippine Air Force, led by Commanding General Lieutenant General Connor Anthony Canlas Sr., foreign military attaches in attendance, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want you to take your seats. First and foremost, I think it is only appropriate that one of my first acts as President is to join you at this momentous 75th year anniversary of our very own, the Philippine Air Force. I congratulate the entire team, the brave, courageous men and women, officers of the Philippine Air Force, as commanded by Lieutenant General Connor Anthony D. Canlas. Your loyalty and commitment and love of country are definitely worth emulation for not only those in the military, but of all citizens of the Philippines. As we fly and aim high for our country and people, given the resounding and historical mandate that this administration has received, it is a most opportune time. Today's event is the perfect time to recognize our nation's continued enhancement in air strength over the years, the air capability that we have used and continue to employ in our national effort towards nationhood. The ongoing defense modernization effort is in coordination with the basic prerequisites that would complement this administration's vision for a stronger, bigger, and effective Air Force, capable of defending and maintaining our sovereign state and of assisting our people in times of dire consequences and today's reality that this dictates. A more modern aerial and surveillance capability is all the more felt given the territorial disputes that we in the Philippines are involved in. This enhanced capability is also proven to be very critical in the Philippine military's efforts to protect the nation from local communist insurgents and the extremist groups in the South. As our country is defined by more than 7,000 islands, several of which are located in active volcanic zones or are in the pathway of some of the strongest typhoons ever recorded in history, natural disasters are certainties we all expect now to happen. Transport aircraft, helicopters, and the like are important facilities that only the Philippine Air Force can suitably and sufficiently provide, especially during humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. All these are just some of the most fundamental and significant functions that we have come to expect from our Air Force. At this point, it is but proper that we honor, acknowledge, and appreciate the Philippine Air Force's outstanding personnel and units, for today is their day, and deservingly so. Congratulations to all the awardees. All of you are worth our emulation, our respect, our admiration. You are what makes this 75th year even more meaningful and essential than it already is. Thank you all to the officers and men and women of the Philippine Air Force. Mabuhay po kayong lahat. And I thank you once again to be part of this 75th celebration of the establishment of the Philippine Air Force. Magandang hapon na po sa inyong lahat. Marami pong salamat.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. administers the oath of office to Department of Justice, DOJ, Secretary Jesus Crispin Boying Rimala at the study room in Malikanan Palace. Secretary Rimala was elected as representative of the 7th District of Cavite prior to his nomination by the President as Justice Secretary. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. administers the oath of office to Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, Secretary Luis Enrique Manalo at the study room in Malikanan Palace. Prior to his appointment, Secretary Manalo is the permanent representative of the Philippines to the United Nations, UN, and once served as acting DFA Secretary during the administration of former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. administers the oath of office to Chief of Presidential Protocol, COP, Adilio Angelito Cruz at the study room in Malikanan Palace on July 1, 2022. Prior to his appointment, he served as the Philippines Consul General in Los Angeles, California, United States of America from 2016 to 2021. His various diplomatic postings included Abu Dhabi, Libya, and China, among others. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. receives Minister of Environment Say Somo of the Kingdom of Cambodia in a courtesy call at the Music Room in Malikanan Palace. Minister Somo attended President Marcos Jr.'s inauguration as the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines that took place at the National Museum of Fine Arts in the city of Manila. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. receives Vice President Vo T. On Chien of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam in a courtesy call at the Music Room in Malikanan Palace. Vice President Chien attended President Marcos Jr.'s inauguration as the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines that took place at the National Museum of Fine Arts in the city of Manila on June 30, 2022. Well, what can you say? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment portion. We have reached the end of today's video. In behalf of my partner Rina and the rest of the Splat Communications and Simplified Strategic Solutions team, thank you. Till next time. Stay safe. Rosa out. Bye.